Shut up and sit down.
Hi guys, this is Bigmeks Workshop and Paint Studio. I'm Dodge, and we finally got round to doing the Conversion Corner series, and there'll be more of these depending on how well this video goes. Firstly, yes, we're working on a Demon Prince, and a big thank you to one of our subscribers, Athol, who sent us a huge box of Games Workshop boxes full of random bits. And this may be a very old kit, but it's still got lots of potential. You can see how old it is here by the paint list. Was that bolt gun metal, blood red, shining gold, black, and that red demon there on the back used to be a really good paint job by Games Workshop, and although the one on the front does look a lot better. So what we're going to do with this model and a couple of other kits is we're going to turn it into some form of Nurgle demon and just see where we go with that. So looking at these kits, I remember when these first came out, I thought these kits were absolutely awesome. I thought they were the best kits ever. They had loads of extra bits, the demon looked great, and now he's just not aged very well compared to what Games Workshop can do now. So we're going to primarily be using this sprue. We're going to be using some bits from the Hellbrute kit, and we're going to be using some leftover bits from the Mauler Fiend Forge Fiend. Now, picking out the first parts, this torso is going to be no good for us. It's too ripped, it's too muscly, but the second one, the one here with the weird armor, that's going to work quite well. It can already look quite Nurgle-y, so we're going to go with that torso. That's what we're going to be using. I don't want to change the legs on this model as well, as I don't particularly like these legs. They're a little bit spindly for size. I want to do something with these Mauler Fiend legs, but we'll get around to that in a second. This is just a tray of parts. This is probably how most of these videos are going to be shot. I'm going to try and keep these parts organised and try and keep this video as streamlined as I possibly can. This is the first time I've had to audio one of these, and well, I've not got any notes or anything because it's not a paint list like usual for our painting tutorials. So we'll be using a lot of these parts, I reckon. If not, we're at least cutting them off the sprue and then putting them in a bits box, which we are working towards building up some more. So first things first, I'm going to bond these parts on, and immediately the concept that I came up with does not work. Look at the size difference on those legs. It just doesn't work. Even if I extend that gut there and put on big shoulder pads, that it's not going to look right. So I went straight to using the Hellbrute bits here. And what I realised was that armor plate in there in the centre is actually really cool and does fit very nicely with that demon model. Also, those legs don't work properly, so what I'm thinking is we're going to take off some of this leg, the thigh, and then replace it with the thighs from the Hellbrute, as they've got a lot of detail in them anyway. So we're going to cut this up and then put it back together, which is weird, but I want to position the legs in a reasonable fashion. I don't want them pointing straight down because I still want those weird goat leg sort of effect that Games Workshop do. I think it looks pretty cool. Carving that out, I'm going to have to be careful with that. It's going to take some time. That's why the video is going to keep skipping forward and backwards. There's going to be no transitions on this one, as I don't think there's going to need to be. So I've cut those off as neatly as possible without damaging too much. And I do think the side armor works quite well for the hips. And as you can see, if you pop that in there, already we've extended the size of the beast, and to me it just looks a little bit more to the right scale at this point. And even if I wasn't doing Nurgle, that would actually look kind of cool anyway, just as a start for a leg replacement. This bit here, I'm probably going to trim this off so I can get the position right of this torso. What I'm going to end up doing is pinning that in there, I think. So once I've got a pin in there as well, I'm going to be able to slide it up and down and get the distance right. And as you can see, the overlap from the demon body almost overlaps the hips of that torso anyway, so now he's got some extra armor. Because me and Andy decided we were going to make him with claws, wings and extra armor, because why not? Now these thighs are the only bit that's too big. The bottom part of the leg, that seems to work quite well. So I cut across the top of these, and I regret snapping this off the way I did, as the pipes on the back do add some excess detail, so I could have just took off the muscle texture at the top, but we will find a use for this piece later on. So now what you can see is I've taken the thigh off the dreadnought with the pipes, and I've got the bottom part of the Mauler Fiend, and they look a little bit more to scale now. They're not too big, they're not too overpowering on the model. With this one I left a bit of the back of the model, sorry, a little bit of the back of the thigh on, as sort of a hope that it would prop this bit of the model up, and it's still a little bit thick, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill out a bunch of that. I did like the pipe details, and obviously it's nice to not have to do too much green stuff with this. If you can get the details to work that Games Workshop's already put in the models, you know, you can really benefit from that without having to be a great sculptor. So I've filed that down a little bit. I've got the pipes to go just into that knee bit there, and that to me looks about the right size, so I'm just going to bond that down. I'm not even going to bond it down that neatly, as I'm going to obviously have to cover those gaps with green stuff and work on it from there. And like I said, we're going to reattach those, and it does seem a bit odd to take them off, but the angle's not quite right. I do find that this pipe that's sticking out, that's kind of cool, and in fact when I cut that down later, well, you'll see that I can actually line it up with some of the other details in the leg. But at this point all I'm really doing is just positioning what I want and where I want it. You know, it's just an experiment. When you first start out a project like this, you've just got tons of bits and you're looking around what will fit where. I kind of like that position. I wouldn't mind making another one like that that isn't Nurgle and just put extra armor on him or something. So I'm just putting a drill bit in there, and I'm going to bond those two together. Obviously I've super glued those, as plastic glue won't work so well with the paper clip in there being metal, and this piece of green stuff is just there to go around the paper clip and start bonding those two bits together, so when it dries we've got a nice solid piece all the way through and it's not going to spin around or snap off. I've also put a nice flat piece over the rest of it there, so that's going to give me a surface to work with when I push the green stuff back, as if there's nothing for you to push it back against, it's going to go really far back and be really hard to sculpt. Next, as it's Nurgle, let's make some intestines. Anyone who watches the channel regularly will have seen me use this technique before. We're just going to use a regular hair comb. We're going to put water on it. We've already rolled a piece of green stuff out, and all we're going to do is put a slight bit of pressure on that and roll it back and forth. Now it's on a cling film tray that I have made, and that's also wet, and that's going to stop it sticking. You don't need to put too much pressure on, you just need to roll it back and forth a few times. You'll start to feel the green stuff squash down ever so slightly, and then you get an effect like this, which can be used for either cables or intestines. But if you want it for intestines, it's best to roll your fingers around it a bit so those edges aren't so sharp. You can also stretch it ever so slightly, and it just gets rid of that really sharp edge that power cables that would have. And then all I've got to do is start feeding that in. A lot of this you just eyeball and make it up as you go along. Try and keep it wet, and as you can see when I'm pushing it around I'm trying to bond it into things. This is a regular piece of rolled up green stuff, it has extra intestines in the back. I do like to make variable sizes and shapes when doing something like this. Make sure your tool's wet. So what I tend to do is I have a knife for cutting things that's sharp, and then I have another knife that's covered in all sorts of rubbish, but it's just for dipping in water, because obviously that's going to affect your blades, make them rust and not sharp. So I do have two blades available to me at all times. And then we have something resembling a stomach. Now I wasn't 100% on what to do with the head when I started at this point, but I did like the idea of the venom on this tongue and the tongue. So I thought, what if we take the top of the head off, the neck off there, and those are little chin balls he's got, they can go as well, because they're not quite Nurgly enough. I wanted to take it away from looking like a Carnifex head and make it look more like a demon mouth. Obviously at that scale there it doesn't fit, but once all those other parts are gone we are going to be able to make that fit. As you can see, I basically used a Dremel for most of that and just went in at 2 angles, and the rest of it I went in with the flippers, took it out. It will need some sanding, cleaning up, but that gets left for quite some time now. This is a torso from the Dark Imperium box set off one of the Death Guard. What I want to do is take the top and bottom off and use the actual chest plate because I like the shape of it as part of the head, and also this one. I was contemplating using this as the face plate for the mouth, but then decided I think it'd look better at the back, so his brains and things are hanging out like that, and he's also got teeth over the top, but we'll get back to that in a bit. As I was saying earlier, I'm jumping back and forth a lot here trying to figure out what I want to do as we work on this project. Again, that piece in my hand now is a Hellbrute piece. The other bit I'm holding on is from the Mauler Fiend, and I'm going to use it as some form of knee pad for armour and bond that up. And I'm also going to put I was contemplating putting on the other parts, the Hellbrute shin pads when the feet are on, over the legs, because this demon's going to have the 2+ armour save, so we thought we'd add a bunch of extra armour to it just to see what we could come up with. Now I did cut that and make a hole in there, but the hole was not in the position that I wanted, so I'm going to drill in another hole above that. Not 100% happy with the positioning of the legs, but the weight of the model was really pushing it down when it's set. So I've put a peg in there so I can move it around, get a good view on it. And I've used the lower section of the Hellbrute join there, as it has the two we've cut off. That's going to be the connection for this. And as I was saying earlier, one of the problems we've got here is that the pipe sticks out a little bit too much. So I'm going to have to cut some of that off. When you're cutting something like this off, and if you want to keep it, you're going to have to cut it a little bit at a time, because if I do it right, I can line it up with some of those details on that leg there. So I just snip a little bit off here and there, and I like the fact that this pipe almost joins up with that raised metallic bit. It looks like the pipe actually goes in there or into the thigh, so I'm definitely thinking about using that at this point. But I got focused on that and didn't think about the positioning of the legs. I've done the same for the other leg. And now at this point with the model, I really need to know whether or not it stands up. I need it to be stuck to something so I can work on it, as there's a long way to go. So what I've done is I basically end up sticking one of the hoofs on, as that's a natural fit anyway, but it's got a ball joint, which is going to enable me to, while it's drying, figure out where I want the other foot. The leg positioning did end up leaning over, like I said, a little bit too far. That's one thing I would probably change. I wanted him to look like he was swinging his arm, but with the resculpt of almost everything, it was quite difficult to get that position. So I've bonded that down, and the other leg has just got a pin in it that goes straight into the base. Just lining some stuff up here, trying to come up with some ideas. I wanted that arm swinging a bit more. It's quite flat, the original model, design wise, so I'm going to add some green stuff to that later on and try and make it look like it's raised up a little bit more. Now this is one of the only parts that I use that isn't a Games Workshop part. This is from a Mantic Demon. It's a spare back because the Mantic Demon I have has wings, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut all those big spikes out because they're quite detailed, and make some Elephantitis foot but with really big claws and toes coming out of it. It also will help match up that shape. See, at this point it does look like he's running forward. Maybe I should have cut those at a slight different angle, made his foot look a little bit more bent. But all I did there was I bonded those to the base, and then I decided to push green stuff into there. And the claws at the back are actually the feet from the original demon kit, sorry, that we've been using. I just thought I'd use them as some back claws. Wanted to bond all that in. Now these little balls that I've put on, if you've seen my other videos, these will be warts later on as I layer very thin layers of green stuff on there, and then I'll open up the green stuff so they're either poking through or I'll just let those be part of the shape later on. But I wanted that bond nice and solid, so I wanted to get most of the legs finished so I can start working my way up the model, and obviously this bit here is going to need some filling in. Don't want to just fill it in and leave it filled in. What I like to do is I like to push that in, and I like to blend both sections together. I always use less green stuff than I need to. I don't make less stuff. Everyone always makes more green stuff than they need to. That's just how that goes. But I like to put small layers on so I can smooth it out a little bit, then add more later on, which is one of the reasons this particular conversion, it took 2 weeks for me to get through, or a little bit longer. Because when you're working with green stuff, you do have to let it set, otherwise you risk putting your finger in it and messing up what you've worked on. And this is quite simple. It's just a piece of green stuff here, just smoothed over, and I've blended the shape around so it looks like it matches the rest of the leg. There's an opening in the leg. Blend that green stuff around, as you can see there, so it opens up the pipes and lets you see the rest of it. Now, I'm not too good at sculpting muscle structure, so there will be more layers added to these later on. But what I started to notice was this thigh now, because I didn't leave the bit of piping on, looks a little bit odd. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to make another pipe, and once I've done that, I bond the top and bottom end by squashing that down, because we can cover it over with more green stuff to smooth it off, and then we're going to push the pipe up against that leg as best as we can without distorting it. And obviously the pipe was made with the comb that you can see there, same sort of technique as before, well, the exact same technique as before. Now for the wings, I didn't like the original wing position, and I thought they looked a bit plain. I wish I'd spent more time on the wings, but I thought it'd be great if I could take out this membrane, since we're trying to armour this thing up, and put in these bits from the Forge Fiend Mauler Fiend kit. Replace that first part so he's got armoured, biomechanical, weird wings. So that was just an idea, and we'll come back to that later on. And here was another idea I was having for the arm. I didn't want them to both look the same. Kind of like this arm, and also if I get it just right, I can make the cut off piece that we snapped off the Mauler Fiend leg almost fit over that muscle texture there. And also the two pipes from the two parts almost match up on the model. So I started looking at that thinking it'd be great if he had one arm that was like bigger than the other, and maybe I would make him a hunchback. That was at least the thought process at this point. As you can see here, the green stuff has literally been a very thin piece of green stuff that I rolled out really fat, put on in the general area, and then just blended in with my tools and then rubbed in with my finger to get a smooth join. And I've put that over the pipe and then opened up the pipe so that shows through ever so slightly, so it sort of matches the other leg that we've got as well. So I did end up bonding this together, and then I started thinking that's kind of cool and horrific. I'm not too sure about the hand at this point, but those two bits should bond really well. I may put warts or some other gore in there, add some extra piping, just make it look a bit more cool. And it turned out that it actually gave a pretty good pose and shape, sort of like an extra shoulder pad piece. So I thought I could work with this, it's going to work, except for that notch there, which is the ball joint for the model. I'm going to take that off with a Dremel grinding disc and just take that completely off, and maybe have some of the spikes. I contemplated having the Noxious Blightbringer bell spike, the big horn with the bell on it coming off there. Didn't get around to doing that, but even though the video is finished, there's probably still going to be more work done to this. So adding green stuff here, not to do anything in particular. The only reason to do this is to start building a template shape to work on later on. I want to start building up the rest of his abdomen and gut area around the back, so I've got a rough idea of what sort of scale things are going to be. Obviously I'm going to do the same on the other side, try and build up those hip shapes. Start building them up in towards the top of the torso as well, as there's not much going on there. We need this to look kind of Nurgle-y. I did find that the scale of the torso after doing these legs was a little bit off as well. I could have re-sculpted them all, but that would have felt like a waste of parts. As you see, it's just small amounts of green stuff being added in there, just trying to make a rough shape. Always give give your shape a little less, because especially with Nurgle you can add a layer of skin over, which I think I've shown you a few times and will show you again in this video, how easy that is to do, and you can thicken it up. We do work with these pipes a lot in this video, I've just realised that, but this arm, because it's one of those old Games Workshop kits, it has one of those horrible seams all the way down where you've joined it. So what I'm going to do is basically apply this pipe instead of bothering to fill it, and just cover the whole thing up using this pipe, which matches the arm anyway, and also is going to be used to make the hand look a little bit less boring. Those claws, I mean, back in the day they were kind of acceptable, but they were never really the best sculpt, to be honest. I obviously don't want to run that straight down the seam. I'm trying to curve the tops and the bottoms to give it a sense of movement, even if it's ever so slightly. And then to make sure it's secure, I'm going to push that right down into the hand, because we're going to do some work there and cover it up anyway, so that's going to then bond there where I've squashed it. Contemplating using the Hellbrute spine to replace this spine. As we were saying, I would like to have done like a hunchback thing. In hindsight, at this point in the video, I will say I wish I didn't do the wings, and I wish I'd built a jetpack of some kind for him. I think I would have been a lot happier with that idea. As you can see, I'm just lining up the spine, and it does go around there, and I was contemplating doing like a hunchback sort of thing, but it never ended up being that. I do like making these videos for you guys. I mean, this is the first one in this series. I just get to let my imagination go and just see what I can come up with. So that arm, as we know, was a hollow arm from the Mauler Fiend, and I'm just generally filling that in with green stuff to give me a base to work with later on. As you can see, the right arm's now been put on and the left arm's now been bonded on. This is so I don't have to keep holding things in place to have a look. I've started adding some more there to the elephantitis foot. There are some gaps in here where the pipe doesn't quite reach that need a little bit of work doing to them. I've obviously angled that right arm so it sticks out a little bit more. But I do feel the way that's all been put together now, it doesn't quite have that same menacing lunging forward look. I do like the idea here of the Mauler Fiend parts again being used as a shoulder pad, as we're trying to armour up this demon quite a lot. I'm also going to need to Nurgle up that arm if that's the case. Once that's on, it's going to be hard to sculpt anything. So I went through this with a Dremel nice and quickly. You'll see me do this in other conversion videos that I've been working on, or green stuff tutorials. You start with the hole, then you put the green stuff into the hole, and yeah, basically squash that in there, and now you can manipulate the green stuff so it goes inside the model rather than adding extra shapes to the outside, which is what a lot of people do. They will just stick green stuff on and then stab it with something, but it still looks too pronounced, whereas it should go inwards. Once I've got it inwards, I'm going to start smoothing those sides off, and obviously because of the technique there, I can make that hole in his arm a lot deeper. I'm just generally working the edges so they don't look too rough. I'm going to do the same thing in this arm as well, as it still looks a little bit plain to me. I've also started adding some warts onto the part where the shoulder pad goes on, because I want the warts to look like they're underneath and growing from the inside. So what I've done here, where that pipe ends, is I've just put a massive ball of green stuff that I'd already let set. I tend to do that with my leftovers. Started working on the green stuff for the thumb here, just adding some extra depth so the end of the thumb looks more like bone protruding from the flesh. And the idea of, well, basically what I end up doing whenever I've got spare green stuff is just rolling it all into different sized balls and shapes and letting it set to be used later on. So I've green stuffed this in again, and you can see the amount of depth you get once you drill a hole and then start working the sculpting tools around that. Start putting some warts in here as we're going to cover this part up. With that ball on his hand, I'm going to turn that into an eye, I think. It just breaks up that boring hand shape. All I'm going to do is use a cylindrical bit of tube and put a hole in some very thin green stuff. Basically all I've done there is layer that over the eye and then start pushing it up into the eye with a particular sculpting tools. I don't know the names of these, but I use wax sculpting tools. And the excess skin, I'm just going to start mucking about with that and manipulating it so it looks like it's part of the rest of the model rather than a standalone bit of green stuff. Be careful and always try and blend your parts together, leaving seamless lines. Gives the model a much more natural look, and it stops it looking like you've just added green stuff on. What I'm doing there is rolling that bit of flesh over, just to make it look like it's sort of tucked over the pipe itself, and the pipe's really going deeper to the inside. Now, as we were talking about the wings before, I've finally got around to deciding, yeah, I'll put some wings on it. Like I said, I wish I'd gone for a jetpack instead or something. And yeah, I'm just going to cut out that entire membrane using a Dremel. Now at this point, also looking back, I wish I'd took out more of that flesh and just completely, well, the muscly part, and just completely replaced it with this mechanical part. That would have made it look a little bit neater, I think. So I bonded those on there, and now I'm in the process of just filling in those gaps ever so slightly, because they're only pinned in there. I want to give them a much stronger bond. So this green stuff's just getting pushed pretty much out of sight for now, just to give me a template to work with and to reinforce the model. Again, doing the same here, but I'm actually going to start sculpting that muscle texture there into the muscle texture from the wings. And this is where I started to realise after I'd done it that I've started to make that thing look a little bit too wide compared to the rest of the model. The reason for that is I was starting to work on the wings separate and not comparing them to the size of my actual demon itself. So the scale does go a little bit off. Whereas if I'd cut out all that muscle part and manipulated it a little bit more, I think it would have been a much better fit. Just overlaying bits of green stuff there and stretching the flesh as you would do with green stuff, allowing some of those mechanical bits to show through. Obviously at this stage this wing's not done, it's going to need much more detail. And as I was saying, when it comes to ripped flesh and things for Nurgle, I tend to just punch a hell of a lot of holes into a very thin bit of green stuff and allow the green stuff itself to do the work by stretching it over something and then just using the tools to manipulate those ever so slightly. I think you've seen me do that in other videos as well. Now I started mucking about trying to figure out how I'd want the wings to look, so what I did is I put a bunch of green stuff I put a bunch of green stuff on the back just to pin the wings on to see what we'd got, as I can always take the green stuff off afterwards, and I did make him quite back heavy. I also wanted that shoulder pad to fit on his right arm, which I've took off at this point, and you can see the glue mark, but the wings were in the way. So what I decided to do was take some more parts of the old Mauler Fiend, and I think these are for his gun barrels, to hold his guns in place. So I carved those off and drilled a hole in, and basically decided I would extend the wings, which kind of works. It follows that same pipe technique with the rest of it, and that ball joint there would be kind of useful to support the back. So I'd be able to drill in the hole there and pin that in quite well and get a much better angle on those wings, but it would require a lot of green stuff in. I also, at this point, with everything else at the back needing doing, decided that I was going to make some bum cheeks for this thing, as it looks like the legs just don't have any support from that part. So to do that, I basically just add 2 bits of green stuff, but I don't try and achieve the look I want all in one sitting. You could do, but like I said, I like to do things in layers. So what I did is I put those down, let them set a little bit, and then put 2 more pieces of green stuff over the top of it, as I've now got a template for the shape, and I can start making them bigger and bigger as I go. And just pulling those around and sculpting them with the flat tool I use this one quite a lot. It's one of my favourite tools. And as you can see, that shape is now starting to take off. So we've got something that looks like, you know, it could be part of the same model now, and those legs look like they have somewhere to go. After that, I still wasn't 100% happy with them, so I am adding another layer, and as you can see, this is a very thin flat layer. Basically just gently sculpt that around and basically just push that over the top, and this is going to smooth out all that other work, and it's going to be more like I said, we're using those bottom parts as a template. We also follow the same technique to make his fat rolls by putting in green stuff rolls around the outside that just look like that, just green stuff rolls, and then using a very thin piece of green stuff, putting that over the top of it and gently just pushing it slightly into the gaps between the rolls, and it will manipulate the rest of the green stuff for you. So I'm finally on to mucking about with the head, and what I've done here is they didn't originally bond, so I've cut out 2 snippets at the side, and now I've got something where I can pretty much glue those two together. As you can tell, this project is actually quite a lot of parts, but we've got quite a big bits box. I once they'd been bonded with glue, decided to put some green stuff in there for the extra support. Now this part, I could have changed my mind either way. I could have sculpted that into some kind of eyes or tentacles coming out, and then used the teeth that the model's got as as actual teeth and face it that way. But I decided I want a blank face part on it, and what I did, instead of doing the eyes or anything like that, I decided to smooth that off, and I will get around to smoothing that off at some point at a later date, but not in this video. I may put a row of spikes or something through there. And the head from the Carnifex pretty much fits in there nice and snug once you trim away some of that jaw. And I was quite happy with that head. I thought that's definitely different. It's something other people haven't done, or not that I know of. Those parts have still not been put on. I've added more green stuff and detailing to them. They are the fat rolls on the back I was telling you about that we're going to cover up later on. Basically, that head will fit on there with a little bit of green stuff. That was that part I was showing you at the back. I drilled holes to pin the wings on, as the wings are being quite a bit of a pain at this point, trying to get everything to bond to the model. So what I realised is I had a bit of a problem now. I had oversized the base of those wings a little bit. The arm wouldn't quite fit on properly, so I took that off. Also, I drilled some big holes with the Dremel into the back to get those ball joints to actually slot in there kind of nice, so I can position the wings in a bit of a different fashion to the original model. Luckily for me, while taking the arm off, I was able to peel off the green stuff that bonded it. It's made a perfect copy of that shape, so what I can do later on once I've got the wings on is figure out how to reattach the arm in a position where it can have the shoulder pad on as well. And again, I've gone back to the gut there to show you that layering up those things, I put some warts on his buttocks and just layering up the fat with very thin layers of green stuff makes it very easy to manipulate with barely putting any pressure on anything, because there are actually dips underneath that flesh, and when it dries, it will dry as one solid piece. To apply the head, I didn't bother pinning it. I basically filled most of it with green stuff, as the jaw stops any of it coming out anyway. So basically attaching that with green stuff, and then I'm going to manipulate the head around to get an angle that I find more interesting. I really like the model, except for the wings. I wish I'd done a jetpack instead, I really do. Now the excess bit of green stuff, I'm using the flat tool again, and I'm going to blend that into the neck, because the neck's already got some details in it with pipes and things showing. So I'm just going to blend those two together, and once it's set, that should be absolutely fine. I can always cover it up with a bit more green stuff and decide that maybe I want to change the texture on there a little bit. And at this point, he's not fully done, but all I'm going to do here is I'm going to start adding extra bits of green stuff off camera, start smoothing out mistakes. But in a second, we're going to go to the finishing part. I'm going to add some warts and stuff up there as well. What I'm going to do is prime him black, prime him grey, after adding some more details on, because what that'll do is it'll allow you to see the mistakes that you've made, and anything that's not green stuffed well will start to show up. You can see everything a lot better when it's a unified colour. And this is the project so far. I'll say it's not 100% finished. I will like to go in and resculpt a few things that I just didn't have time to finish. So basically he's made out of just the 3 kits except for that 1 foot, which you could probably sculpt out of anything that you want. There's definitely improvements I would have made. I would have made him a little bit taller in the torso area just to make up for that. But this angle here is the one I like the best. I love the head and the arm that I sculpted. That could use a little bit more depth on that flesh at the top. And as you can see, I did start adding that spine in there. And added a tail because the spine looked a little bit out of place. Like I said, I just wish I'd done a jetpack instead. It would have been a bit cooler. I could have used the Mauler Fiend weapons for that, the big plasma cannons and a few other bits. But I do hope you liked that video, guys. It took about 2 weeks just to muck about with and come up with the ideas and stuff. So don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and we've got some big thank yous. First of all, a huge thank you to Athol again for sending us that whole box of 40k stuff to muck about with. That's absolutely awesome. A big thank you to our patrons, the Orc Boys, Matt, Ludwig Hofbauer, Warren, D-Wack, Kit Lindquist, Acmus of Dawn and Mark. You guys are awesome. You also help support the channel through your donations, and all the donations go to making better videos. Also go to giveaways every month as well for the models that we paint in tutorials that we don't need. If you want to join them on Patreon, please do, as we're starting a new tier for the conversion corner called the Bigmeks tier, and any donations to that go to getting more parts to make more really weird conversions and more mad stuff. I do hope that one takes off, because I do really enjoy making these videos for you guys. Also, if you want to get hold of some kits to bash, go check out the Outpost. Brand new stuff at a second-hand price. Really good service, nice delivery. Follow our affiliate link down in the bottom, and we get store credit at no extra charge for you, just for the advertisement. So I do hope you like that, guys. I enjoyed making it. I'll probably come back and do some more work on it at some point, but don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment, share with your friends, and we'll catch you in the next one.